A while back, I started this YouTube channel slash podcast thing based off of two ideas. One, I really like making characters for D&D and other tabletop RPGs. And two, there are nowhere near enough hours to play even a fraction of the characters I'd like to be building. So I thought it might be a fun idea to record me talking about creating these characters and make a little podcast out of them. So I did. I recorded the first episode about an elf barbarian and uploaded it to YouTube. And then life proceeded to get crazy, and my son was born, and Character Forge fell by the wayside. Now that he's old enough that some degree of normalcy is returning to our lives, I'm planning to get the forges running again. But my wife recently listened to that first episode and correctly pointed out that the way I was talking about some of the mechanics, and dice rolling in particular, could be taken the wrong way by listeners. After discussing it, I've decided to wipe the slate clean and start over. The first episode was always kind of a pilot episode anyway. I mean, if you listened to that video and enjoyed it, great, I'm glad you did. But I'm going to start again with a proper episode 1, hopefully one more in line with the quality I want for this show. That said, we're also changing the format a little bit. If you watched that first episode, you know that there was just a static image on the background. And as you're watching this now, this is not a static image. My wonderful wife has agreed to draw the characters for us as I'm talking about them. And if you saw our teaser test, then you already kind of know how that's going to go down. So that said, before we get started with our first proper episode and a new character, I need to get some thoughts out about mechanics in general and dice rolling in particular. I will be the last person to tell you how you're quote-unquote supposed to play a tabletop RPG. The G stands for game, after all, so that at the end of the day, as far as I'm concerned, if you and your group are having fun, you're doing it right. I, and the groups I play with, tend to get the most enjoyment out of the storytelling aspects of tabletop RPGs. The mechanics are great and all, except when they're not. I'm looking at you, surprise condition replacing surprise round in 5th edition. But we always play with the table rule that if story and mechanics disagree, story wins every time. Now at this point, a lot of people would chime in, and I know this because I've been having this conversation a lot recently in YouTube comment sections, and ask, why use the mechanics at all? Why even bother rolling dice if you're just going to ignore outcomes you don't like? Like most art forms, and storytelling is an art, limitations can really help to change an okay work into a great work. Some of the best stories have come from times when our rogue just randomly rolled really terribly at stealth, and we had to change our whole plan around this new wrinkle. But just like a musician has to ask themselves if the limitations they have imposed for this piece of work are actually serving the greater good of the piece at all times, as storytelling-focused RPG players, my groups and I ask ourselves if following that dice roll is really going to help the story. If worrying about encumbrance will really enhance our enjoyment. Sure, things can get out of hand if we just ignore everything, but a careful and judicious decision to break the rules can often lead to us having much more fun than we would otherwise. Now, how does this relate to dice rolling in particular? In the pilot episode, when I was rolling up stats, I mentioned, rather flippantly, as my wife correctly pointed out, bumping one of the scores I rolled down to make sure that I have at least one negative modifier. One of the things I didn't mention in that episode is that we have it as a table rule that every character has to have at least one negative modifier, because for us, characters are more interesting story-building blocks when they have mechanical flaws in addition to their character trait flaws. I, as a GM, also have the rule that each of my players can bump their highest stat up to a 16 if all of their stats are lower than that, for much the same reason. Our goal when creating characters is to build interesting people whom we can then tell interesting stories about. So if the dice fall in a way that would lessen that, we fudge a little. We still roll because the variability can help give us ideas. I'm currently running a Zelda-themed game, and my wife rolled up a Korok, one of the little tree people, with 2 7s, which, if you're not familiar, means -2 modifiers for 2 stats. And that's done a lot to shape the little Korok's character. That said, if we want to play a certain kind of character and the dice try and stop us, we just do it anyway. In all this, the really important thing is that everyone at the table knows what is going on and is on board with it. So I'm telling you now, the characters I build on this podcast are probably not going to be Adventure League legal. I'm going to be adjusting dice rolls from time to time. I'm going to let a warlock choose a shield as their Pact of the Blade weapon. I might let a cleric splash a few spells from the sorcerer spell list. Who knows, I might even throw in some homebrew nonsense. The point here is not to make the best character, whatever that means. I want to make an interesting character that I would have fun playing, if I had the time to play even half of them. And I hope you have fun hearing about them. So, I hope you look forward to the next few episodes. We've got a few planned out already. Be making a druid in the first episode and a wizard after that. So let me know, let us know what you think about this new format. And until next time, keep those forges lit.